All right. Thanks, y'all, for putting stuff in the chat. You can tell we are all new to this platform, so please give us some grace. But thank you for joining us today. Our presentation is The Power of Youth Redesigning Inequities in Our Communities. Before we jump into our presentation, we want to tell you a little bit about us at Creative Reaction Lab. Creative Reaction Lab is a nonprofit based out of St. Louis, Missouri. Our purpose is to educate, train, and challenge Black and Latinx youth to become leaders in designing healthy and racially equitable communities. We do this work through various programs and initiatives at both local and national levels. Our movement, which is Redesigners for Justice, is centered around changing the way people address systemic oppression and inequities. And not only is that a part of our programming, but it also shows up through the webinars, workshops, and consultation services that we provide. But for today's purposes, we're really focusing in on the experiences of young people who have been engaged with Creative Reaction Lab. We have our youth presenters who are going to talk about some of the community initiatives that they've been involved in, and also reflect on the ways in which they experience power as young people, decision makers, and change makers in their communities. So I'm going to pass it off to our youth presenters to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Olivia. I use she, her pronouns. I am currently the executive assistant to Antoinette Carroll, who is the president and CEO of Creative Reaction Lab. But I'm also a writer, a collaborator, and an organizer, and also a yoga teacher. And I'm currently founding an organization called Transformative Teach that really works to center socio-emotional health and joy for BIPOC youth. And I graduated from University of Colorado Boulder last year, which is what I'll be talking about in my work today.
Hello, everyone. I see people all over the world, Turkey and Toronto. Hello. So my name is Raina, and I go by the pronouns she and her. I have a culinary career previously of 7 years. I went to a art school, so I'm an artsy kid. And I'm also the founder and CEO of Diva Reloaded, which is a digital platform for creatives and artists who come together and really tell their story in their own voice through creative expression. And it brings awareness to things like mental health, self-awareness, things of that nature. I'm previously the 2020 Community Design Apprentice Alumni through Creative Reaction Lab, and I'm also We Power's graduate of Community-Led Policy Change, and I'm currently also anime and cosplay events planner. I like anime. I love anime. So if you got any cool anime, drop it in the chat. We'll see it. I'm also currently Creative Reaction Lab community organizer and healing resident. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
And then Robert was supposed to be here with us today, but unfortunately he was unable to make it. Robert is also a 2020 Community Design Apprentice alumni. And as I mentioned earlier, my name is Deja. My pronouns are she, her. I'm currently a program associate at Creative Reaction Lab. I have a background in public health, but I'm currently a social work and public health graduate student. And just like Raina, I too love anime, but I also love food, webtoon comics, and working in partnership with young people, hence me being involved in Creative Reaction Lab. So now that we've shared a little bit about us, let's talk about the framing for our presentation today. What power do youth have in becoming decision makers in their communities? We use this to frame our presentation because we know that typically Black and Latinx youth are not empowered to be decision makers within their communities. As a matter of fact, oftentimes they are on the receiving end of decisions and policy changes that directly impact them. And oftentimes these changes are ones that perpetuate systems of oppression and inequities within their communities. As we have this conversation, and if you've ever been to a Creative Reaction Lab webinar before, you know that we think language setting is really important as we have these conversations. So the term of the day is power, which is the capacity or ability to direct or influence the behavior of others or the course of events. Now that we have that framing in mind, we're going to transition into our youth presenters actually diving into some of the community initiatives that they've been involved with recently.
Awesome. So I want to start by giving a little bit more context for what I'm going to be talking about. And so as I graduated from University of Colorado Boulder last year, and so that's the background for my work. So Boulder, Colorado, and so I could spend hours talking about what occurred, what I did, but it would take a long time to essentially cover like the breadth of what actually occurred. And so in my last year, I joined CU Student Government as the Director of Diversity and Inclusion, having navigated the last 3 years of my time there in a predominantly white institution and holding the truths of who had been historically centered and dismissed. And so in October 2019, there was a racist incident that had occurred on campus. And so Black Student Alliance, essentially my time in student government was being a liaison for the Black Student Alliance with executive administration, working around issues of discrimination and harassment policies, including how various support structures, such as the Office of Victim Assistance, counseling services, and the Office of Institutional Equity, amongst various other procedures, such as bystander trainings that staff and students had to take, how those were supporting and harming students. And so essentially we were reviewing and recommending to administration a path forward to really address harm. And COVID happened and kind of that work and those discussions stopped. And then when summer came and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor protests were occurring, those conversations started again. And this time they kind of took on a different path. It was still continuing the conversations that we had had in the fall, but it took on more of a path in regards to reallocating resources to support BIPOC community. And so, yeah, so this is a timeline between fall 2019 and summer 2020. Yeah, if you want to go to the next slide. And so essentially in this whole year, again, this is a really skimmed down version of all the work that happened. A lot of what I took away was really recognizing how students continue to carry the weight and labor of trying to progress work without any administrative initiative. And then I also understood directly how administration would do a lot to take accountability and charge off their shoulders. Really listening to students, but not actually taking the initiative to do any change, and really doing the necessary work of reimagining how resources can function and be supportive, but having the audacity to speak about how students were organizing. And then again, in regards to what it looks like to have sustainability, and looks like to really center what it means to have an understanding of sustaining and of creating systems that are about relational change work, and also really recognizing what it looks like to have a critical transformation of how our systems operate. So yeah, that's a very skimmed down version, but I'm going to pass it to Raina to talk about her work.
Hello again, everyone. About the Community Design Apprenticeship Program that I am currently the alumni of. So it's a creative reaction lab program dealing with incarcerated, students and youth and just anyone that's been impacted by incarceration of the criminal justice system. And also it was based upon food access. So a lot of the communities dealing with underinvested communities in St. Louis, like Normandy and Wellston, they lack healthy food access. So the program was pretty much based off of creating that food justice and saying enough is enough. We did a lot of research and development on going into the stores and groceries, or better yet, the lack of grocery stores and convenience stores that's around. And it really just lacked healthy food. Like, we weren't necessarily shocked, but it was just astounding. Like, the amount of the amount of resources in the good neighborhoods versus the underinvested neighborhoods. It was just really an eye opener, and I will never forget it because we went into this one convenience store, and man, the food in there was just so bad. Like, it was just rotten. And then we actually went into the back, and it just didn't look good. It just didn't look safe. It just didn't look edible, anything. So it really pushed us to be like, okay, you know what? We're going to get out in these communities, and we're going to address this issue, you know? Next slide. So we came up with well, I wouldn't say an overall solution, but we came up with something that we wanted to do in the community after that. We was like, this is enough. So we came up with the project called Blessed and Highly Favored Food Boxes. And it's pretty much addressing healthy food access in the Normandy and Williston area. And really, it was such a fun project. Like, we did so much in the community. We got so much community feedback on like the design of the box. If you see here, you can see like we decided to do clear boxes so you can see what you're getting. We did like a cute design and logo. We even decided on how we were going to layer the box. So a lot of times when you get food boxes, it's just thrown in there. And then you got stuff that's like mushy at the bottom. So we were really mindful of that. And we couldn't have done it without the community. Like, as you can see, you see the map that we were going off of, and you see things like we took a picture of one convenience store, and it just had soda and all the other sugary things, and you can only see like a few healthy options. So we really wanted to put healthy food in the boxes, and we got the input from the community, and not just that, we got so much more out of it. Like, a lot of community residents were saying, oh, well, how can we use this food every day? How can we make recipes out of this, and how can this last? So we took all that in consideration, and it was just such a fun creative process. And the importance of the creative process, of course, we went through the ideation stage, which is forming of what are we going to actually do that's dealing with healthy food. And we did our research and development. Then we went to the prototype stage. We did like 5 or 6 different like prototype boxes before we even got to this actual final design of it. And of course, and after the prototype, we did a couple of um, engagement with like community and surveys and things of that nature. And then, of course, the final day, the execution, we got out there, and when I say the food boxes went within like 2 hours, we estimated a time span of 4 to 6 hours, and it went like hotcakes in 2 hours. And we were really excited because it was like that stigma of underinvested neighborhoods being like, oh, we don't eat healthy stuff and just eat fast food and junk food. It really pushed the limit there. It was exciting to see that, never judge a book by its cover. They were excited, they were happy, and they were happy it was for free too. So, yeah. Next slide.
Thank you, Rain and Olivia, for sharing some of your experiences. After them sharing, we wanted to give an opportunity for them to share some deeper reflections on power as it connects to their experiences with those community initiatives. So we have a couple questions, but knowing that we have limited time together today, they'll only reflect on maybe 1 to 2 of these questions. But they are, how did you feel power shifted to you as a youth when approaching your community project? What did you learn and or teach your community about shifting power to youth? And or if you didn't feel empowered to be a decision maker in your community, how did you shift power to yourself? Feel free to jump in, Olivia or Raina.
You want me to go first? I
Yeah,
could
go
go
for it.
first.
Go for it.
So I felt through this whole process, I felt liberated. I felt excited to see that the youth, including myself, were being heard and we were being taken serious. Like, you don't get that often with being a part of the youth. You get, oh, well, you're young and you're dumb. You don't know what you're talking about. And then, like, your voice, your opinions, your insight, perspective on things is just never heard. So it was refreshing to be in a program where you are heard, they believed in you, like you show up as yourself, you don't have to pretend like something you're not. And I really learned just that the creative process isn't just an idea. You have to, there's so many layers in it. And coming in, I was so like fresh eye. I'm like, yeah, I got all these ideas. Let's do it. And you don't realize not only you are the cohort with your team, but there's layers to it. Like, there's different stages of it. And I got to really learn things like the prototype stage, which was so fun to me because I learned that not only can you that you have like a design or product service, but you have to keep going through it, like trial and error. That's the biggest thing I learned from that stage in the creative process. And it really blew my mind because I never had a project or, an idea where it was just layered like that. I usually just personally by myself, I usually just get into a project, do what I need to do, learn a little bit about it, and then execute it. Not in this case. It was like, okay, we gotta go through all of the phases and emotions and things of that nature. So I really got to learn just how it is to create something and give it to the public. I definitely felt empowered. I felt empowered throughout the whole thing. It was a big it was a big shift for me because my family background, they don't know any of this stuff. They were dirt poor, and to see that I went through a program and accomplished it, achieved it was just major. It was huge for me. So breaking generational curses is important, you guys. Keep that in mind.
Thanks, Raina, for sharing that. Yeah, going off of that, it's interesting that you started with the liberated because I had like the opposite experience in regards to being in a place of higher ed. Because a lot of the conversation that came from my experience was, oh, well, you're just in undergrad, like y'all will be out in 4 years and new students will be in, so we don't really need to address these issues. And just like a lot of the language. So a lot of my empowerment came from the youth and people that I like, my peers that I was working with in the spaces that we had together when we weren't in spaces with administration. And knowing, yes, these issues have been going on for years. And so being in these spaces, we're like, yes, we're going to keep using our voices and elevating these issues so that folks hear us. And so these issues don't persist and that we can actually shift them. So that's where a lot of my empowerment came from. And then also just really knowing, like in regards to my community, like knowing how many people stepped up to support us. Like I think that was like a really big empowerment and learning experience as well. Because being in the space that we were in, like a lot of the meetings and conversations that we had, it was just like we would end it and we were like, okay, well, I don't know where we're going next, which was really discouraging. And so just continuing to lean on our community, lean on each other was super powerful. And so I don't necessarily know for me if this experience had power shifting. I think it had for me, I think it was power shifting in regards to me being in the position that I was in student government and being able to, like when I left that role, being able to share and know who was coming after me and be like, yes, use your voice and take up this space because you belong here. So I think that's what I would say.
Thank you for sharing that, Olivia. And as we think about both Olivia's experiences and Raina's experiences, how can we continue to shift power to youth? Or in some instances, like Olivia shared, how can we start shifting power to young people inside and outside the formal positions? So we're going to share a couple takeaways from our own lived experiences.
And I will kick us off because this kind of goes off what I was just saying. So one of my main takeaways was really unlearning notions of traditional rules and how they cannot change because they've always been that way. So really kind of shifting that paradigm, shifting that notion, and really sitting with this idea of, okay, well, these are rules. Where did they come from? Who are they harming and how are they harming people? And having these hard conversations of, okay, these were created by someone and they can be recreated, and new things can come into place that are actually supporting youth and supporting people that are not harming.
Another takeaway is to remember that not all young people are the same. Oftentimes, our brains like to just think of people in monoliths or like putting people in a box, but recognizing that young people have a vast array of experiences and backgrounds. And so when we are talking about power shifting, not only is it important to shift power to young folks, but to also consider which youth are you centering in your power shifting? Are we only focusing on the straight A student or the honor IB program student? Or are we actually shifting power to a diverse range of young people that reflect the communities that we're in?
I would say the takeaway here would be, and that's to anyone, not just even youth, but in this case is for youth, know the power of your own voice in addressing inequities to create change.
And a couple more takeaways.
Know the impact of power shifting and power sharing. And that means there's a slight difference. Power sharing is, okay, I'm in the room and I'm in the room with other people. I'm able to share the power dynamics of and give it off to other people in the room. Well, share in the room. Power shifting is me transitioning my power onto someone else, if that makes sense. So there's a difference of power shifting and power sharing. A lot of times, youth get into the room and there's no power sharing, meaning this person could the person that's not necessarily youth could dictate their power onto other people without listening to their insight and the values of what they bring to the table. And with that, I'll give it off to you, Deja.
It's actually Olivia for a second, but no.
Oh,
Yeah, another takeaway that I would say is really recognizing and uplifting the value that youth bring, not just bringing them into a space just because you want to listen to them, but actually listening to them and honoring and centering their experiences and their voices because they have value. And then because of that, what does that look like to take action that honors what they're voicing? I think that is super important, and something that often gets dismissed and ignored.
And just a quick build off of that before I make my final point. It is so important, like that not only like you're listening to it, but as you go through the process of taking action, you keep young people up to date with what's happening. Even if there's like, oh, we weren't able to do this thing that we first talked about, let them know what the modification is and give them full transparency of what the situation encompasses so they can understand and continue to engage in that process. But most importantly, pay youth, period. Young people deserve to be paid for the work that they're doing, just like we pay any other expert for their perspective. Young people's experiences are rich and can really improve the things that we're doing in our communities. Also, hashtag where the money resides. Young people have other things they have to provide for. And so when you can pay them for their expertise, they're able to show up better because they're also able to meet other needs financially. So knowing that we have only a few moments left together, we want to open it up to questions. Feel free to put your questions in the chat. I personally can't see it, so Raina and Olivia will read the questions out loud and we'll address them as we can.
The first question we have is, where might we find this recording after the session?
Now, that is a very good question. Since we're not running the conference, we're not quite sure where the recording will be stored. I would assume it'd be in a similar spot to where any of the other presentations are being stored.
I believe so. Deja. I think you could go back and look at our recording of the day.
Are there any other questions in the chat? Is that silence and no? I can't see your faces, remember.
Well, there's a comment. All edited videos of sessions will be available 2 weeks after the exchange.
Thank you for whoever provided that answer in the chat.
Marina Kim? I probably butchered your name.
Thank you so much. Any other questions for our youth presenters or about youth in general or sharing power with young people?
Any comments that might be lingering, or just some insight on something? I don't know.
All right, not seeing anything added to the chat as of right now.
Oh, we have a question.
All
She's
right.
typing. She said, I'm just typing.
Thank you for reminding us to be patient. We forget that sometimes when we're in virtual environments, the questions can't come up rapid fire like they do when you're able to just vocalize or communicate your questions in other ways.
Marina actually did have a question earlier. So the question was, let me just read it. I think commitment to continual learning is so key. Can you share examples of how to help institutional leaders do that? Awesome. So thanks, Marina, for asking that. So when I say unlearning, what I'm really speaking to is this idea of really recognizing like your position and unlearning like ideas of like traditional norms, like in regards to racism, patriarchy, sexism, classism, unlearning all these norms and systems that we all function and operate within, and these power structures that we operate within. And so just having like continual conversations, and it's a lot of inner work. When I say unlearning, I'm like talking about like the inner work of what that looks like in your own life, interpersonally, with people, like in relationships. So that's what I'm really talking about with the unlearning. And so when you're like in institutional spaces, like as a leader, I'm really thinking about like when you're in a position of power, how that shows up in continuing to perpetuate racism, perpetuate sexism as you're overseeing or managing people. I hope that answered your question.
Oh, we got some questions coming.
Yeah, we do. Let's see.
We might have time for one more. If I have interpreted things correctly, our session ends at 2:45. So we will get to at least one more question.
Andrea Wong had a question. She said, Thanks so much for sharing. I have a question. You mentioned that not all youth are the same. How can we form connections and cooperation between youth that come from different backgrounds?
Rand and Olivia, do y'all want to share your perspectives on this one?
I would say just to form cooperation between youth that come from different backgrounds, I would say just having that simple sympathy and empathy, and just being open to listening to someone's story. that they're tell their own personal story, and that will open up so many doors for you of cooperation and connecting and engaging. So I would definitely say just be open-minded and don't overstep someone else's personal story. Just listen to them. Listening is just simple listening does wonders. We got another question. Since working together for this session, could you envision running a project in the future together? And I answer yes. We most definitely, we all work together anyway, so it would make sense to. And I think the other question was, what would be a dream project for you all to collaborate on?
I don't know if we have time to answer that question because I think the session is supposed to be over now.
I would say a dream project for me would definitely have to be, again, dealing with like the creatives and artists and anybody that wants to get creative, and forming that bond of, okay, don't exploit creatives and artists as well.
All right. Acknowledging, can you all hear me? I can't tell if y'all can hear me.
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
hear you.
Okay. So thank you for responding to that question. Being mindful of people's time because I know there are other sessions that are coming up as well. Or we have 7 minutes left. I see it in the timer.
Yes.
You know what? We'll just keep answering the questions then for now. Olivia, do you want to share your perspective on that question as well?
For dream collaboration project?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm always thinking of so many different projects. So literally, I don't know what my dream project would be, but honestly, yeah, I think going off of Raina's, it would be like some kind of like project in regards to like artists and creatives. And creatives for me is like literally like writers, designers, maybe like painters, drawers, like anything, like some kind of collaboration of just like all kind of creatives. Because we're all kinds of, the three of us are creatives as well, so some kind of project around that.
I think those are both great ideas. I'll share a quick idea for a dream project. I feel like it's just having a space for young folks of like various ages and experiences coming together and talking about the issues that we're seeing in our community, but like having the space and structure together without maybe like not necessarily without adults, but like where it's very just youth centered in like working through like issues of mental health specifically, or looking at certain ways that racism manifests like in specific school systems, just like really having more space, kind of like what we have at Creative Reaction Lab, but just where we can have more young folks come together, which is hard, since we're all spread out. But thank you all for attending this session. Additional questions, feel free to bring that. You can stay connected with us. I know someone mentioned IG. So I don't know why I said it like that. Mentioned Instagram. And so you can stay connected with Creative Reaction Lab via Instagram and Twitter. Yeah, I'm struggling today, y'all. It's okay though. You can stay connected with us on Instagram or Twitter. Our handle is CRXLAB, and that's how you can find us on both of those sites. Olivia or Raina, can you drop that in the chat, please? And then other ways you can stay connected with us on the slide are our email addresses. And then you can also reach out to our program manager, Jeff. He was unable to be with us today, but hence his title, he oversees a lot of our programs that focus on engaging young people in Creative Reaction Lab. So thank you again for spending your time with us today, and we appreciate being able to see some of your questions and conversation or comments in the chat. And we'll stick around for those last few minutes for any additional questions. Seeing that there aren't any additional questions so far, people could be typing. Olivia or Raina, is there anything else you feel like is really important to share as you think about the ways that we can be better shifting power to young people?
Let's see. Well, the first step would be reaching out, outreach, networking. Definitely hit me up. I'll be willing to conversate, collab on a project, anything.
I think that goes back to a question that was posed earlier about how to create these relationships with a diverse range of young people. And I think a large part of that is kind of what was talked about earlier, but it's like that continued engagement. So like even something as
Mhm.
simple as like checking in with how someone is doing and learning more about them as an individual, that goes a long way. And even if, it might not be necessarily well received the first time or it feels like a little awkward, like continuing to pursue those relationships and that effort goes a long way, especially in building trust, which we know takes time.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. I think those are both really important. Like relationship building is like a big part of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Making yourself a little bit vulnerable to receive all the things that comes with
Mm.
it. Just a little bit of vulnerability.
Yeah, that definitely goes a long way. Engaging with, especially when we're thinking about the dynamics between adults and young people, like that can go a long way because there's often this like perception that adults are like that they have everything together and that they know what's going on. And realistically, we are all constantly learning and evolving. And so when adults can show their vulnerability, it makes it easier to see them also as a whole person and to engage in learning, which is really goes both ways.
Hmm.
I would have to say this was fun. This was a fun presentation.
It was.
Olivia and Deja did a great job.
You did too. I love your energy.
Well, thank you. I had to go back and get my hot cocoa.
So I'm very grateful that y'all had this opportunity to have this platform to share your experiences and that we were able to come together to do it as well.
Yes. Yeah, that was awesome. Thanks so much.